migration. Not the ministers of labor that deal with labor migration, but ministers of finance and economic planning made it a key issue of discussion and being addressed on the continent by setting up the high-level panel on migration. The resolution that was passed at that meeting in Addis Ababa recognized the vital role that migration can play in Africa's transformation, and I think the Executive Secretary spoke eloquently about how important migration is on the continent now. And more frameworks since then have been put in place. I know my colleague Oma is going to be speaking about all the frameworks that the AU has put in place. And it's important for the high-level panel to look at these frameworks in the context of the work that the high-level panel can make it work. Subsequent to the resolution, the high-level panel was constituted in Monrovia, led by the then president of Liberia, who is the chair of the high-level panel on migration, Madame Johnson Sirleaf. Okay. What was agreed as the work of the high-level panel by the resolution and what it encouraged the high-level panel to do. And this work of the high-level panel was given, the responsibility was given to the African Union and ECA, working with IOM. In all the work that we've done on migration, we've been working very, very closely with IOM, and that's the reason why IOM is hosting us here. One, to increase collaboration and cooperation amongst African member states, the regional economic communities, and international development partners to promote migrant rights, facilitate their movement, and reduce vulnerability of migrants, and especially women. And if you look at the 5 themes that were agreed on in Monrovia during the meeting in January, all these issues were included in the 5 themes that were agreed on. And the technical committee in all its meeting has been addressing these areas and looking at how the high-level panel can make a difference, especially by ensuring that there is collaboration and cooperation. And in this meeting, the high-level panel needs to look at how it can work towards that collaboration. Look at institutions and governments that are in the north, and also look at what is happening on the continent and provide that linkage and see how we can get the different parts of the world to work together. And that's the representation in the high-level panel is across all the different continents. And then engage the policy implication of the state of knowledge in determining the nature and patterns. Again, this is about data. Intra, and international migration streams in Africa. The center of the high-level panel's work is on the continent, whilst also addressing international migration. And then the impact of irregular migration, especially for transit countries, the impact on border communities, and also assess skilled migration, both for countries of origin and destination, and thus the linkages with all the other frameworks that have been put in place. For example, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the role it can play on labor migration. And ILO is going to be presenting, as well as IOM, on the labor migration program on the continent, and to look at where are the pieces of work that the high-level panel can pick on that program that AUC, ECA, IOM, and ILO are partners in. And then enhance the production of migration-related knowledge, which is the report that the Executive Secretary was speaking to, and which we discussed with the President yesterday. Its production, as well as its presentation to the heads of states, critical is to sensitize policymakers, especially heads of states, and to define a program of how the high-level panel can work with heads of states across the continent to share with them the critical agenda, including the key messages that are coming out of the Global Compact on Migration. I think the President did share that the Global Compact on Migration negotiations in New York are moving fast. The Africa Group, in the case of Africa, are engaged fully, and the role of the high-level panel in influencing them is very limited. However, the technical team, which is AUC and ECA, is engaged in providing the support. But the key messages that are going to be coming out of the Global Compact on Migration will inform and be part of the work that the high-level panel can then use to influence policymakers, especially heads of states, again emphasizing the word implementation. Because again, the Global Compact on Migration could be an outcome that is not implemented, And we know there are lots of discussions and debate around whether it's a commitment or it's just a document that will facilitate the different players across the regions to address migration. And I think IOM and ECA are going to be talking about the Global Compact on Migration and sharing with us the messages that are coming out of New York. And then to provide guidance and support to policy dialogues on the African perspective and international migration key. I cannot repeat what both the executive secretary and the president said about the importance of looking at intra-regional migration and the role it can play in the transformation and development of the continent. Create an environment that is conducive to encouraging the mobilization and effective utilization of financial, political, and intellectual resources. Resources to support the implementation of the various agreements that we are talking about. Can the high-level panel and in the report look at local resource mobilization to be able to implement? And of course, we are aware that in New York, the discussion is on how will the Global Compact on Migration be financed? Where are the opportunities of financing from the continent beyond the Global Compact on Migration, but on all the other work that is being done on the continent on migration? Raise awareness amongst African member states, governments, citizens, and the international development partners. And of course, the report that is going to be produced by the high-level panel being central to sharing the messages and raising the awareness. So these basically are the key roles and responsibilities of the work of the panel. And yesterday we had a long discussion with the president, and I'm sure she's going to be sharing where she sees the high-level panel going. What are some of the opportunities that exist that the high-level panel can use to be able to profile its work, influence what is happening on the continent, and ensure that migration remains a key developmental issue on the continental agenda? Thank you, Almas.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you very much.